we want to learn about the software as much as we can, just because of curiosity. And then the next thing that we have to do as a work group is, once we learn software, make a decision: is it right for the publishing houses, and how will we configure it for the publishing houses? Okay, that and keep in mind that the team, I might leave someone off, but Jan, Danny, Ray, Andrew, Carl, worked years on Sun Systems to learn how to configure it to get it to where we are today. So just knowing how something works functionally in the software is half the battle, but the other half of the battle is figure out, oh, we want to use one of our analysis codes to be fund, and we want to use another analysis code to be function, and we want to, you know, and working through all of that, we need to and so once we learn the software somewhat, we've got to start figuring out how are we going to design a core that will work in the publishing houses, and or do we even want to use it? It's very reasonable for us to put in days and days and days and days of work learning how to work this, and then decide that it won't work, it's too complicated or too extensive. Now, one of the problems with the complication is that PD in Australia says that Sun System's too complicated. You'll never get it to work in those islands off of the coast there. The people out there just can't handle that level of complication. Well, I could always counter that it is true that the Sun System is complicated, but we have simplified the interfaces so the accountant does not see the complication. Is that right? Do you guys agree with that? You got an amen on that? Okay, they don't see it because of the work done for simplifying it. Now, the Sun Plus is complicated because we're trying to follow the accounting manual, and the accounting manual is too complicated, but it's not the software. Well, we have the same situation with this inventories module. What we will see today is terribly complicated, very complicated. But what we put together for the end user would be more carefully, so they only see the screens that apply to them. They only see the functions that apply to them and the processes they know. So, for example, in payroll, let's see if we can go, not payroll, sorry, in inventories, and I'm trying, this is what I've got this whiteboard for here. I'm experimenting with it. It's sort of a new thing for me, and you know, in this we have, we are trying to record the troubled entries that we want to be able to handle is a debit to inventories whenever we purchase inventory. You can see my old shaky hand there, right? Inventory, you reading that okay? All right, I know it's reading into the light, but we'll just go ahead with it right now. Inventory, all right, so we purchase inventory for $45,000, okay? Now, and then we credit accounts payable or cash for $45,000. All right, so that's one inventory entry. When we would make this entry, we want to update the item count in the inventory system and somehow or another keep track that that's what we paid for it, so we could do our LIFO or FIFO or weighted average, okay? And then when it's time to sell something, we are going to credit inventory, okay? We're going to credit inventory for the amount that we sold using LIFO, FIFO, or weighted average, and debit cost of goods sold, okay? That is our goal. At the same time we're making that entry, we want this entry to occur, and we want to update the count so that we know that the inventory that we no longer have our accounting says we only have 15,000 of inventory left, but we also need to update that we only have 200 of the items left. Okay, so just to give you a little marker somehow, let's say we bought 500 of them here, and my math is not that great. Let's say we sold 300, and the math is maybe not all that great, but we sold 300, and that's leaving 200 for us still on hand, okay? And so that's sort of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, one of the things, the next level of what we want to accomplish is that inventory and debiting inventory and crediting accounts payable in a publishing house is never that simple in a publishing house. Because in a publishing house, what we have done, all right, we're going to go through the process. This would be like buying it and reselling it. In a publishing house, we're going to go through this sort of routine, okay? So we are going to debit inventory. I got to write smaller here. All right, we're going to debit inventory, and that particular inventory that we're debiting is an account called work in process inventory, okay? And we're going to credit cash, all right? Let's say we do that whenever we buy the copyright from the author, okay? We send a check and we bought the book that we want to publish, okay? Or we may have bought, Gustavo, at your publishing house, you're going to buy the rights perhaps, or get the rights from the Review and Herald to publish a book, or whatever. So you're paying out cash for that, okay? And then you're going to debit inventory and credit cash, okay? As you make a payment to the person doing the graphic design, they're laying it out. And you're going to do, I got it a little bit backwards, you do inventory and credit cash whenever you pay for a translator, okay? Gustavo is going to have a bunch of translators there, okay? And all of these will go into this work, and then we'll pay for printing, and we'll pay for paper, and we'll debit inventory and credit cash when we do inventory, all right? All right, now, and so when we buy the paper, okay? And so now, just let me scroll this. Okay. That is inventory, all right? And now we're going to debit cost of goods sold and credit inventory when we sell the books, okay? If somebody might be saying, well, no, that's not the way to do it, Mac, because I remember from college that we will debit inventory, finished goods, and we'll credit inventory work in process whenever we're finished making them, moving them from inventory work in process to inventory finished goods, okay? And then when we sell them, we'll debit cost of goods sold and credit inventory finished goods for the ones we sold. Does that make sense? We're following that? All right, well, here's the challenge. In this cost of goods sold, 300, a very honest question from the publishing house is, how much was that for copyright? How much of that was for printing? How much of that was spent on translation? How much of that was spent on paper? How much of that was spent on shipping? And so forth. And so our challenge is that it's not just that we want to keep track of inventory, but we want to keep track of the elements of inventory all the way until they hit over the cost of goods sold. We want to know how much, the natural business management is not of a publishing house is not going to be happy with a sales figure and a cost of goods sold figure, and that's like 90. Cost of goods sold is like 90% of their expenses, and all they have is one figure called cost of goods sold. They're going to want to know, what was the breakdown of that cost of goods sold and each of the types of elements that we have, okay? All right, so, let's see. All right, so when it comes ready to make this movement from inventory work in process to inventory finished goods, we want to keep track of what were the cost elements of that, okay? And when it comes to moving it from finished goods to cost of goods sold, we want to keep track of the cost elements that make that up. Make sense? Okay. All right. So last time we had a inventory master record right here in the master record. And in the master record, we had all of these attributes about inventory we wanted to keep straight, okay? We needed the item number and the item description and any other attributes, like is this a Spanish book, Spanish language book versus an English language book or whatever, okay? So we had these other attributes coming in here. And then we also needed to keep track of the zone, if you remember the zone, okay? That can be whatever we want it to be, but our class example would be we had a refrigerated health food zone, we had a canned health food zone, bulk, we had Ellen White books on shelves and case books or the zone, and we also had warehouses. Okay, and let me just change the way I drew that a second. Okay, just forgive me for just learning on this whiteboard business, but we have location over here. And I think our locations, that's sort of spelled wrong, but it was a subset connected to that of what warehouse it is in. Okay, so a warehouse has a location and the item is there. So we can have more than one warehouse with more than one location. And the issue is that it is possible that you are thinking, well, all of our places only have one warehouse. Well, it may be that you actually have more. We'll use this warehouse function to keep track of call porters, where a warehouse may actually be a call porter or a distribution center. So don't think building warehouse. It could be someone's back room, what books are in there. Okay, and we had all these characteristics in here that we could program, and we could have whatever characteristic we wanted. We can just continue labeling the warehouse. Continually labeling the item, the inventory items. And if you remember, I reminded you that we can have 10 attributes that are hooked to the item. Just like we have 10 analysis dimensions, fund, function, restriction, TFWW, we have 10 that can be hooked to transactions. We can have 10 that are hooked to descriptions of items. Okay, this was a reminder. Okay, any questions on that before we go ahead?
Clear.
Clear. You're clear. Okay, this is just reminding you. All right, now, on the same level, the same sort of picture, okay, let me get that out of there. The same sort of picture could be drawn about a movement. Now, a movement, so the simple thing to learn about inventory was the stuff we learned last week about this managing the physical possession of inventory. The challenge for this week is managing movements. Movements of inventory are different than inventory. That is, a movement can also have 10 attributes. Okay? that can be hooked to them. We have many things we want to keep track of on a movement. For example, we want to keep track of the movement type, okay? All right, that's very similar to journal type, okay? And on a movement, we want to keep track of the movement number, okay? Don't worry, I'm not trying to give you an exhaustive list just so you get a sense of this. We have movements, and a movement of inventory is exactly what it sounds like. I move it from one shelf to another shelf. That's a movement. I receive inventory into the warehouse. That's a movement. I issue inventory out of the warehouse in a cell. That's a movement. So, so these are very similar to journal entries. Okay. All right. So we have movements, and with our analysis dimension setup, we can have 10 movements or another part of your analysis structure where you can hook 10 analysis dimensions to a movement. What do we want to keep straight in the movement? All right, like what department moved it, what type of item was it, and so forth, okay? So a movement is very similar to a JV, ledger entry structure, okay? One part of the movement that is very important to us is that the movement, I'm not exactly sure which would be the best way to illustrate this, but let me just draw it downward. A movement is firing off the JV, okay? So a movement is done, and when it is done, it makes a JV. Well, with our JVs, we want fund, function, resource, and restriction. So a major challenge, I can just tell you right now, is that we have to pick up attributes onto a movement from somewhere. I'm going to show you where's. There's plenty of places it can be picked up. And then that movement has to pass to the JV, fund, function, resource, and restriction. Okay? And so we have to figure out how to have the movement pick up the attributes that we want and then pass them to the JV. A minimum being passed to the JV is the fund, function, resource, and restriction, because that's what we're requiring in our accounting system, okay? And so that's going to be our boogeyman. I'm just so you can keep your eye on the ball. Our boogeyman is picking up attributes that we want to know about the movement and making sure that they are passed to the JV correctly. And as a minimum, those 4 things and what other things we want to keep, okay? So that's what we're looking at. Now, so the movement has to include, besides attributes, it has to include, you know, what is the location that's being moved from. So we have location from, okay, you know, and then we have a what location to. Okay, so if you think about it, if we're moving inventory, every movement has something about from or to. Okay, you're not going to have a movement without having something going on with these two. So when we receive something, that would be a to. Where location in the warehouse did it go to? And if we move it from one shelf to another, it would be a from and a to, and then when we issue it, it's a from. Okay, clear enough? Clear enough? All right. So let's go ahead and get into the system now and see it. But so right now, just to reiterate, is that we have to keep our eyes on these attributes. And we have to collect the attributes here that we want to pass to there. So the first step is making sure that we've got them, and then mapping them so that these attributes and the movement attributes show up in this attribute. Okay, so we might actually draw this, if I could draw this a little bit here. We have the item, okay, going into a movement of the item and producing the JV. All right, so let's switch around here. Let me fiddle with this a minute and switch this, and I'll quit sharing that. Okay. Now, are you guys hearing me okay? Do you hear okay? Do I need to put a headset on?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you hear me?
You're okay.
You hear me fine? No headset needed?
You're clear.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
All right, good.
But Mike,
Yes, sir.
if I am following you, so we have to set up a special movement type, and because not every movement in the inventory system will implicate a JV.
Right.
Because if I am just moving from one shelf to other shelf, it doesn't mean I have to make a journal entry. I mean, in my accounting system.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And so the interplay between the accounting system and the movements are where I am stumped. Okay. You're going to see a movement happen, and it's going to produce a JV. Well, I will tell you that I have days and days of work getting a movement to produce a JV. Okay? So you're going to get a little bit of a head start on me, or a leg up from me, because I am going to show you one working and that it can work. And then fundamentally what we're doing is looking at one that is working and reverse engineering so we can make our own. Okay? And so what we're going to do on class, or at least until we get tired of working, is that we're going to see that it works, and then we're going to try to build we're going to see that it works, then we're going to sort of take it apart, and I think that will be enough for today. And then on another day, we'll try to build our own from scratch, you see, you know, or so forth. Okay, so that's what we're doing now. All right. All right, so let's share screen. There we go. I don't want to share my screen. Actually, what I want to do, I wish I hadn't done that. I always jump the gun. More options. I want to share. Let's see. At this point, are you seeing this virtual box manager? Did I do it wrong?
Yes, you need to share the virtual machine.
All right, so you're not seeing anything right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing anything right now?
No.
Okay, let me just try sharing screen. Well, I could try one more time. Thank you for your patience.
You should see two virtual boxes on your list. So it should be the second one. Yeah, that's one.
Are you okay? All right, so let me get us a fresh start here. This is And I did practice a little bit yesterday, but you're going to think, he hasn't practiced at all. Well, I tell you, it's not so simple, okay? It's just not such a simple little thing to, it's a lot different. It's a lot different because I like teaching a class where I look like I know what I'm doing, you know, and this is not what we're doing today. All right, so here we are, and we have order fulfillment, inventory, purchases, and sales are the 4 elements that show up on your virtual machine. How do we stand on the virtual machine installation on your computer? So do you guys have it?
Yes.
All right. How do we stand on that? All right, so I got Siri. I'm not seeing your faces, so I guess I'll just have to ask you later. Okay, that's all right. All right, so I hope that we start getting them installed because pretty soon we're going to be in a point where you need to be producing something from these classes. You know, where we're going to take it up to a point where I say, well, this is as far as I've got it. Good luck, guys. Let's figure out what the next step is. Okay, so remember from last time we have order fulfillment, which has some inventory items on it, like the item master. Okay, remember item master is the thing where we have the item itself, the characteristics of the item can be hooked to the item. We could have product groups, we could have serial numbers, and so forth, okay? And then we have, so we have picking, and so things that are over here actually are surprising when you see them under order fulfillment because you would think of them as being inventory. But inventory is sort of a pureness, and order fulfillment is this complex process of actually fulfilling an order, okay? So over in inventory, we have movement order entries, okay? Movement order entries. So before we go to movement order entries, let's go, we did this at the very end of our class last time, let's go to inventory inquiry, okay? And so we'll click that, and we have these, it's too early in our process to start selecting forms because we've got to decide which one we like the best, okay? And I think I like basic the best, okay? And I was tempted to come down here and say, do not ask me again, but I may be change my mind next time. So when we configure it for our publishing houses, we will decide the best ones, and we'll have the form experts, we'll have design exactly what we want, but right here, let's just use basic, okay? And we go here, and this is how we do questions about our inventory. And our class inventory item is GN3001. If you remember that from last time, that's that European whatever that is. And the reason we're using GN3001 is that you want to be playing around with something that is there. So you don't want to be having to struggle recording the issue of inventory when you don't have the inventory. So you got to latch on to one of these so you make sure that you've got real number of items there. You've got items there that can be sold and issued and moved. And so that's why we're just sticking with G30, their inventory item. Now, if you're like me, it says for warehouse code, you feel like you want to put in the warehouse code. But actually, that's not the way this works. This works, if you leave it blank, it gives you everything. So if you put something in, it reduces the parameters of your request. So if I put in a warehouse code here, I would get all the items only in that warehouse. And if I put in a location code, I would only get items at that location, okay? Or if I put in a batch reference, I'd only get the items that are in that batch. So I'm not going to put in anything at this point. I'm not going to put in any limitations. And so I don't want any limitations also. I'll leave all of that blank. and I've got all of history and all of projected, okay, and I go, okay. Okay, so it goes over. It's still working. Going a little bit slow. I might have crashed. I left it running. There we go. All right, so in London, I only have these items in one warehouse that's in London. Because I left that blank there, if I had had items in my other warehouses, they would be listed here. All the warehouses would be listed here. Okay? That inventory in London, I click current inventory there. In London, I have the inventory at 2 locations, shelf L-B-05 and also a location L-GI-inspection. So these 3 items are ones I'm presuming in our sample database, PK1. Remember, we're in PK1, so everything in our world is a little bit different. But I'm presuming that what is happening in PK1 is that items are received, and before they can be sold, they're put into an inspection area that they have to be inspected before they moved into the regular shelves. Well, you could make up any other story you want. You could say, oh, well, these have been identified as having a problem. We have moved them from the LB05 location to the inspection area. Okay? But that's all right, whatever we want. Okay, and you can see here that we have, while we're continuing to look at it, we can go through these details, and if I remember correctly, there's not a lot. Okay, I guess we get zone code, okay, goods inward, so it looks like there's 3 being inspected in the zone name there in hardware zone. And remember, zone is the subset and can be a subset of your warehouse. So you can set it up this way, but you don't have to, where you have the warehouse. Within the warehouse, you have a zone, and within the zone, you have the locations. Okay? The zone can also be something that works on its own perspective, like all of our warehouses have frozen goods, or all of our warehouses have canned goods or something, and it becomes a different dimension. But the starting point is for thinking of subsets. One way of looking at it is our largest set is the warehouse, then a subset of that is the zone, and a subset of that is the location. Okay? And so we have these things, that's that, and we'll continue going through current inventory, source detail, okay? Where did we get it from? Not what was our supplier, but what was the movement that caused us to receive these things, okay? Batch details, we're not doing batch accounting here. Batch would be, we want to keep track of pharmacy goods by expiration date, or we are making things in batches and we want to keep track of how many we have in each batch. I don't see how we'll ever use batch in the Advent system. And then we have the analysis details, and we have the analysis codes here. And the analysis codes would be how one way that we're keeping track of such things as was the cost for copyright, or was the cost for translation, or was the cost for, and so we have these details based on that. You know, I think that's where, I think right in here is where we're going to keep track of, in one of these dimensions, the type of cost that was incurred. So when we get it over to cost of goods sold, we have those same details available for our managers of the publishing house. Okay? Now, the historical transactions, so we went through current inventory, we went through all of these tabs. Historical transactions, you can see here, yesterday I was practicing, okay, and so you can see my couple practices of things being issued and going down, okay, and you can get historical details by location and so forth. to me, that is getting way deep. We're keeping track of what location did the transaction take it from, and so forth, okay? And then we have projected transactions. These projected transactions are when we have ordered things, and the fact that they're projected means that our salespeople can sell them, but they can't promise delivery until the projection occurs, the projected event occurs. So they're available for sale, but they're available for sale with stipulation. Yeah, we've got some coming in on Monday. We can go ahead and write you up, but it's not shipping out until Monday. Those are projected transactions. And so when our salesmen look up here in the right-hand corner, they can see what we have on hand, okay? And then of the amount that we have on hand, we have 373 in the warehouse, or see right over here in current inventory, 373, but 3 of them have been allocated. Unfortunately, the number 3 is there twice. That 3, as far as I could tell, that 3 that is allocated is not the 3 here in inspection, okay? These have been allocated to the number 3 is the same, but they're different 3s. Let's see. They're different 3s. Don't think of them being the same. That these allocated were connected to a previous sale, okay, and will be picked and removed. And so when a previous sale, when we record a sale, we could choose when the inventory is relieved. And so the way that they have set up PK1 is that when we make a sale, the inventory is not relieved until it is picked, okay? So this has been allocated to a sale, but the item has not been picked off the shelf, and so it still remains in inventory. Okay, we're going to talk more about exactly when do we want to relieve it out of inventory, when exactly do we want to record the transaction. We'll do that later, okay? And then reserved, as I explained last time, if someone inquires about inventory and I make a, they say, do you have 100 of these things? I check, and I check that we do have 100, and I say, yes, we have 100, and are you interested in buying? And they say, well, I have to get back to my leadership before I can actually sign the contract. And you say, okay, we will reserve them, those 100, for 3 days. And so, and this is how, so you would reserve them, the salesman would reserve them, so if the contract does come in, that we then have it available for fulfillment. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. And so, reserved is exactly what it says it is, where somebody has reserved a quantity so they're not available for sale. And so if you take the quantity on hand, subtract those that have been allocated to transactions that already have occurred, subtract those that reserved, you have the quantity available. 370 is the quantity available for immediate delivery. But then we can have projected quantities that are hooked to future transactions, like we've ordered them, would be the clearest example. We have ordered them, and so that we have those coming in, and so now the salesman can see the 370 is what's available for them to sell, and then they can take a peek at the projected to see what they can also promise, okay? They can promise some that we've already ordered. And so the projected transactions are over here, and so they're able to look and see what's happening with the orders, that they might can sell some that we have already ordered. Okay, so let me have some feedback from you. Is everybody clear on that?
Could you please remind what's the difference between allocated and reserved?
Yeah.
I am a little bit confused there.
Yeah. Allocated is a little bit confusing in that normally when you think about a sale and you're sitting in principles of accounting class and your Principles of Accounting class teacher says, all right, we sold $100, we sold 100 of these items, and we need to take them, and so what's the entry? And the students very faithfully say, oh, well, we'll debit accounts receivable, credit sales, and then we'll debit cost of goods sold, and we'll credit inventory. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's good enough for an accounting class. That's fine. But in our system here, we're able to say exactly when do we want that entry to be recorded. Exactly. So what if we said we wanted a sale? A sale is recorded, a movement entry is prepared, but the entry relieving the inventory doesn't happen until they are physically picked off of the shelf. Okay? So when the sale is recorded, when the sale is movement is made, okay? Now, by the way, when I say the sale is recorded, that was a little bit of a misspoke, because we also have the same control of when do we want the journal entry made.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so not only do we have the control when we want to relieve the inventory, we also have control of when we want the journal entry made. So the movement order is made, and right away we want that items that were sold in that movement order are allocated. Okay, they are allocated. And to make it really confusing to you, we also control when they're allocated. So at what point do we want to burden the inventory so someone doesn't sell it? What point do we want to remove it from inventory? And what point do we want to record the sale are all controlled by the movement. Okay, the movement, which we're going to learn today, right now. And so the movement, so allocated says we still have it, but don't sell it because we've already sold it. Reserve means we have it, but don't sell it because I got a deal that might work out on it, and I need to have that many set aside and held, not sold. So when the deal comes in, then I can fulfill the deal. You see the difference between allocated and reserved?
So allocated is not yet delivered.
Yeah,
but
it's
it
not
has been already sold.
But probably sold. Reserved is not
Still
sold.
waiting for the deal to be signed. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, more or less. And also a little bit of this, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that we, in our configuration, define the terms. Okay? So what we mean by allocated at a publishing house may be different than what I just said. When we learn more about what allocated means, and we'll start learning about how to configure it and to mean what we want it to mean. Okay? And reserved can mean what we want it to mean. After more about how to use it. Okay, now, so the point of me coming over here, by the way, wasn't all of that. The point of me coming over here is for us to take a peek and see that we have 373 items. And so jot that down on a piece of paper, 373. For you that have a good memory, you don't even have to jot it down, but we have 373 items. So we are going to do an issue now, and the two things that we want to see in the issue is, did the inventory leave? Was the inventory reduced, and did the journal entry get made? Okay, and so in a few minutes we're going to come back over here and hopefully see that number go down. All right, and so let's go over here. So that was the inventory inquiry, and then we have a movement order entry. All right, so this is analogous to a journal entry. Okay, so we have a journal entry to give you breadcrumbs to understand which way we're headed with this, or a little lead on this. This is like a journal entry, a ledger entry, and it has a type, movement type, and it has presets just like we did over in the financial side. So right now we're going to do an entry, and this is similar to us going in on the first day of an implementation and showing someone how to do an entry. But then, before we go very far at all, we'll be over here in movement types, where we will spend all of our time setting things up so the entry is simple for our users. So the user has your bookkeepers out at the publishing house, Gustavo. This is what they are going to see only. And only the most sophisticated users are over here. Well, when our head starts spinning with the complication, it's going to be over here. The users are only seeing that simple thing here. Okay, so here's the movement order entry. Okay, and we'll have one just set up just perfect for them, and we can have as many movement order entries as we want. But the one that I've got working is an issue, and so we're going to go to the issue. Okay, and so we could have them just like we have different journal types. We have different movements. Okay, that's not exactly where they show up here. This is the form. Let me show you where the different movements show up. Okay, all right, so now this is slightly confusing, but it's very simple because this is what your bookkeepers are going to see, only this screen. And it is as simple as a journal entry, okay, all right, and we can rearrange these as we want. So we just pick the form, okay. Now we're going to pick the type of movement that we're going to make here. So to me, this should be on the top, and on a few of those other forms, this on the top. But right now, we don't fill in the reference number here, you see. We're going to right here, okay. And now this is where the user is picking the movement type just like they have to pick the journal type, okay? And so we are going to do issue, okay? We're issuing inventory. We made a sale. We've sold it. All right, so that was one click, okay? Then I'm coming over here to item code, and we know that's our GN3001. That's 2 clicks. And then I've got to say the item, okay, the quantity that I'm issuing, and let me put in here 10, okay, items, 11 items, all right. And then because I want it to come out of a certain shelf only, okay, I'm going to come over here and pick the shelf, okay, and we saw that that was at the shelf it was LB05, all right. The user doesn't actually have to pick it if it's only one place. If I'm trying to keep track of what shelf it's on, how much I have on each shelf, then I have to put it in here, okay, but I don't think we have to put it in here if it's, I don't think we have to put it in here if we're not trying to keep track of it at several different places, okay? I'm just looking at my notes to make sure LB05 is right. We go, okay. All right, now, so that could not be easier for your bookkeepers, okay? We put in the fact that it's an issuing, that it was the item that we're issuing, the number of items that we sold, and from what shelf. And I'm suggesting that we probably don't even have to put in what shelf if that was it. All right, now we're going to learn what this means in a minute, so don't let it confuse you, but I am going to confirm all. Okay, confirm all. We're going to learn what confirming means in a minute. Okay, I confirmed all, and then I will click exit. All right, now, and you see the little screen. Do you all see where it says the JV789? You see that? The answer is yes, no? Do you see that?
Yes.
All right, Gustavo, was that you?
Yep.
All right, so you see here where it says Journal 789 for actual ledger has been created. Well,
Yep.
that is where you break into your happy dance, that you have, in fact, got a journal entry to come out. So I was making movements for nearly a week before I could get them to produce a journal entry. So while you're not particularly happy, when you see it come up, I am particularly happy. And one.
Congratulations.
Pardon me?
Congratulations.
Right. And so to get the journal entry to actually produce, okay, is a big deal. All right, so now we have journal entry 789. Okay, I'm trying to find a pen to write that down, but I think I can remember it. So 789, we come over here, and we go over here to, oh, and before we go over, let me do it right here. So we're back over into Ledger, the familiar ground for us, and we want to do a journal inquiry, right? Are you following what I'm doing here? We're going over to the journal inquiry 789, right? You with me? And we're seeing the entry, 789, and so this is the entry we just made. Take a moment to look at that. You can zoom in. So we sold 11, and it made an entry for 91.52. One question that we have to answer is, well, how did it get the 91.52? How do we control what number, what amount should be made, the entry made there? That's where LIFO and FIFO and weighted average come in, okay? We have to make sure we're getting the right amount. And don't get confused by the account codes, because the account codes are the PK1 account codes. The 26, I have these things written down here, so I'm not just, the 26,000 is the cost of goods sold account, okay? All right, so far so good. We needed cost of goods sold to be at the table, and it is there. And the 62,000 is the inventory account, okay? Don't worry, I didn't make these numbers up, that's just what's in PK1. So it is also the right entry to be at the table, okay? So account to be at the table. So we have account 2600 cost of goods sold and 6200 inventory. But now let's look at the debits and credits. What we wanted was a debit to cost of goods sold and a credit to inventory. And that's not what we got, okay? And so somehow or another, our movement order is not making the right journal entry, okay? The movement order isn't making the right journal entry, and let's see how else to say it. Because we wanted to be debiting cost of goods sold and crediting inventory, and we got them up wrong. So part of our task will be learning how is it making this entry, where did the debit, what needed to be debited and what to be credited amount-wise, and what account need to be debited and credited, and it looks to me that this PK1 is doing it backwards. Also missing in our journal entry is that we would love to get a debit to an accounts receivable person or cash and a credit to sales, okay? So to be really good at this, we need that entry to debit accounts receivable and credit sales, or debit cash and credit sales if it was a sales transaction. So that's where our work comes into play, is to get, first off, to get the entry right, and the second off is to get it so it records the sales portion as well. And then finally, the third thing that we are going to be wrestling with is that when you get over here to the analysis codes on the transaction, okay, how to pass the fund, function, and restriction and resource that needs to be in our analysis codes. The PK1 has department, project, employee codes as analysis dimensions, but that journal entry didn't pass any of that information. So if department or project was required on the MOB, right? Or is it MOP? MOP, sorry. If that department number was required like ours is for the 26,000, the cost of goods sold, for our cost of goods sold requires a fund, function, restriction, and resource. So we have to have, this entry would not have worked in our Sun Plus environment because we haven't the requirement of what fund, function, restriction, and resource needs to be used. Okay, so you see...
Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
We have in this presentation just one column for taxes. But I suppose in some way we can set up different taxes for different transactions. I mean, is this possible according to the country law that I can have a different rate and a different taxes for the different products? Yep. Maybe just an item, it can be subject of 2 or 3 different taxes. Is
Yep.
it possible to set up?
Yeah, where that would have to be part of what is entered the tax jurisdiction, so the right tax was charged. You see, you know, that's what you want, is that you want the tax to go over someplace to the tax authority to go in as a liability for the amount of the taxes that needed to be set up as a liability. Or if not that, at least you want it to be tagged with the tax authority that you owe the taxes to as part of your dimensions. You know, so if you're sold something in one province, okay, one state or one county or something that needs taxes, you at least want to know what your sales in that tax jurisdiction were. And so somewhere that has to be fed and passed all the way through to this journal entry, okay? Yeah.
Okay.
So I have no doubt in my mind that it will do it. Now the next question, of course, is how? Well, that's what you guys are here for, okay? And so that's what the type of thing that we have to work on this until we learn. Okay, so we have seen that the journal entry was made, and we have seen that it is really not all the journal entry we want. We want a debit to accounts receivable sales, and also we have seen that right now the journal entry is slightly wrong. This is just straight PK1. So this, everything about this is just came out of the box Sun Systems, okay? All right, and then we also will go back over to our inquiry, and we issued 11 of these things, and so this is G301, okay? I think I click action, and somehow or another we have to redo it, okay? There we go. I just clicked OK, and it's doing my calculation again. Okay, and one reason, and so now it went from, what did we have before? Okay, so we did have 372, I believe. All right, I think the 11 that we just made was that one right there, okay? Somehow or another, my date didn't get changed on my setup here. But the 11 I believe we just did was that one, okay? I'm almost positive that was the case. But in any case, it was 372 a few minutes ago. Do you remember when I told you to write it down? And it is now 362. It was 373. Is that right? Or is any of you? None of you wrote it down. Are any of you there?
Yeah, 373. You're right.
Yes. Somehow or another, did it go down? That's the main point. Do we need to do it again to make sure it went down? Okay. Next week, David Anochi Larby will be presenting to us. only joking. Okay, So I'm pretty sure the inventory went down. I should have written it down myself. I was just counting on you guys. All right. Now, so we have now done an inventory movement that you at least can see it is supposed to work. All right. But it's weak in 2 or 3 major areas. The entry wasn't as complete as it should have been. The second one was the entry actually wasn't right. And then the third area is that we have not passed any analysis dimensions, and we know in our world we have to pass analysis dimensions, like fund, function, and restriction. So we go over here to movement types, okay? Hold on just one second here. Good. I appreciate it. It cracks me up a little bit when you're sitting in my class. Don't send emails to me, okay? I'm just kidding you. That's one of the rules I used to make for our team meetings. At least if we're in a team meeting and you're sitting there doing your emails, at least don't send in emails to me, so I get further behind. Okay, so now we're going to go to movement order types. Now this opens a world of complication. I want to emphasize the point that our bookkeepers would only see movement order entries. That's all they would mess with. They would know how to do a movement order entry. The other thing that accountants would need to know how to do is open the inventory master and the inventory inquiry. Those are like the 3 buttons on the screen that they need, okay? The bookkeeper, the clerk, bookkeeper managing the warehouse, and the salespeople, that's only 3 things they need. They would not see any more than what we have already done. Then we have movement types, and so the rest of this stuff is what we set up in the background for them. We may train them to do things like add inventory zones and locations and that sort of thing, okay? But we have movement types. Now, last time we did this, Siri, because he's so serious, that wasn't meant to be a joke. Siri is so serious. Looked pretty good. The last time we did this, Siri was really concerned about what do we do first, what do we do second, what do we do third in an implementation. And that's way too advanced for us. This deal here with inventory types is the center point, and it's assuming that we have done a bunch of pre-work before we get here. And if, in a logical sense, the pre-work has been done before we get here. But we don't know enough to do all of the pre-work. So we're going to come over here and look at the center point of a movement type, find an issue, and then we're going to go and learn about that issue and then come back. We're going to learn about something type, go learn about it. We're going to see we need it here, go learn about it, and then come back over here and go do it and then bring it back over here, if that makes any sense. So in a theoretical sense, we would do everything first before we get over here, and then it's all ready for us here, but that's too advanced for us. And so what we're going to do today is just reverse engineer the issue, okay? Movement type, and we come over here. Remember, these are the types that are already been set up. This is what we could, this is what we could have, go ahead.
We are seeing gray screen only.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so it says
Maybe you moved it in another screen.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning it. All right. So what I hope is that you see my Sun systems now.
Yes. Yes, we do.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. All right. So I don't know exactly how far to go backwards, but let's just go right here. So our accountants will only see the movement order entry. They will only see inventory inquiry. Those are the two screens that we have looked at so far. Inventory inquiry was this one, and then movement order entry was this one where we put in okay, so they would see this one. Okay, they wouldn't see that little place where I just fiddled around because you would select one for them. And they might see 4 or 5 movement order entries. All right, so, and then they come over here to pick the movement type. The accountant would pick the movement type of what they are doing. And what we are learning now is how to set up a movement type. They wouldn't set them up. We set them up for them, or we train someone there to set up for them. But we just did the movement type a minute ago that worked for us. We did issue, okay? And so we go okay here, and so let me just get out of that and exit out of here because we want to set up the movement type called issue, okay? And so this movement type that we're looking at, we would create as many of these as we needed, okay? And only that many. But the one that comes to mind is receipting of goods coming in and issuing and selling of goods going out. So for our class right now and for the rest of our time, we are reverse engineering the issue movement type that we saw work just a minute ago. Is everybody clear on what I am saying? Okay. So this is the movement type, and your assignment and our challenge is to make a movement type. If we can properly make a movement type that does what we want it to do, then we have successfully mastered inventory. That's where the boogeyman is. Okay, so it looks fairly simple, but there's all kinds of dirty stuff here. We have 4 or 5 tabs to master. Then we have these little sub areas, okay? MO analysis and stages. So we not only do we have to learn the 4 tabs and learn to get those right, but we have to also get value, stage, MO analysis, and the presets. Now the presets are actually simple because the presets are exactly the same as presets over on a journal type. You want it to automatically populate something every time you open it. This is what the presets do, so that's all right. All right, so we've got this one here. Maybe I'll amend it so we can see it a little bit better. Okay. Gustavo, you'll be happy to see that you can data access group this. So not just anybody can make a code, get into it. You can limit it to any group you want. So that will allow you to have the control that you've mastered using. Gustavo is our data access group expert. Okay. The transaction code, the default currency code in the transaction, if you're working in a multi-currency environment, you can default it if you want it. And then this is an issue. Okay, it is an issue because it's named issue, but it is also inventory movements can only be of 2 types, a receipt or an issue, or both, okay? And then the pricing data source is from the movement order entry date, okay? Okay, what date do we use for the pricing? And this would be from the price book. What is the default location? Oh, excuse me, no, this is not the default location. If the item is returned and we reverse this entry, where do we book the return? So here is one, we could put returns in a separate warehouse location, okay, or we can put it back on the shelf where we got it from, okay, all right, and so forth. We'll go there, all right. Hold processing, all right. Hold processing is what are you allowed to do a partial order, okay? And I think we always will want to do hold processing, but none of that was selected here, so I'm not going to do that. Inventory allocation. Now this is back to the question that Siri asked earlier. What is an allocation? Okay, an allocation is marking something as sold, but we still have it. That's what allocated means. We sold it, but it hasn't been picked off the shelf yet. Okay, and so we get to define what allocation means, but that's the starting point of it. And on the stage of order confirmation, we then take it out of inventory and call it allocated. Excuse me, we don't take it out of inventory, we just call it allocated. Okay? And so here we have it, the possibilities are, do we call it allocated when we pick it? Okay. When the picking has been confirmed, or when it has been sent, we picked it, but we haven't mailed it yet, and so forth. And we will put this on order confirmation, okay? Now, you might not remember, but order confirmation is something you already know about, okay? So when we go over here and we did a journal entry, excuse me, the movement order entry, all right? When our bookkeepers are doing a movement order entry, remember we will preset this so they don't have to see that form choice again. And you see, remember me coming down here and confirm all. Okay, I put in this entry, I put in the amount, the item being sold and all, and then I says, I'll talk about this in a minute, confirm all. Well, the confirmation step can be separated between the bookkeeper who put it in and some supervisor, okay? So if we want to have a bookkeeper recording an entry and a supervisor confirming, or a salesman putting in an entry and a bookkeeper, the controller confirming, this confirmation step is simply that. It's a separate approval step that we can use or not use if we want to, okay? We have managed the design in our journal type construction. We manage that button, what it means. Okay, so don't ask when do we confirm. That's what we control. We want a supervisor to confirm an inventory movement, or we want salesman to record the entry and the vice president for finance to approve the sale, any of that sort of stuff. You can do anything you want. Okay, so but at the point of that, when I push that button over here, when I push that button over here, allocated it. Okay, all right, and so I believe that's what that is trying to say. And the possibility of manually allocating it, this would be something that you would do if the item were maybe being controlled by serial numbers, where you have specific items that have been sold and you're keeping track of the very item that went out the door. you know, the serial number. That's manual allocation, that you have to go into the entry and show which individual item was sold, okay? And this is the reservation, okay, and so forth. That you saw reserving them earlier was reserving them allowed, and here it is not used by this movement type, okay? And as far as I know, the reservation is being done with a special type, a movement type. Okay, so if you want to be able to have your salesman reserve them, then you'd have to create a movement type that does reserve them. Okay, costing. This is a good time to wake up if you're about to fall asleep. This is a good time to wake up because the costing is where we are going to control the excuse me, I made a mistake here. Costing, all right, is when does the book entry get made? Okay, so these are the stages here, and when is the accounting entry getting made? That's what's happening on that one, okay, if we're doing it. And then the accounts, and we're surprised to not see any accounts here. You would expect to see accounts. Let's see, let me make sure I am right here. Yeah. All right, so one way the accounting can be controlled is by the movement type, okay? So what account is debited and what account is credited can be controlled at this point by the movement type. All right, does that make sense? Now in a JV, we control the accounts at the movement, at the JV type, journal type. We can preset certain accounts to be debited and credited. But we actually have other places that we can control the account being debited and credited. So let's see, for example, we wanted to have health food going to one cost of goods sold account and books going to another cost of goods sold account. If we wanted to control it by movement types, we would have to have a movement type for each of those two so it could go to each of those two accounts. Okay, so we'd have to have issuing of health food and issuing of books, two separate ones, depending on whether we're issuing books, so it could go to those two separate accounts. Well, that sort of stinks because you're issuing books and you're issuing health food in the same event. You know, the customer buying both of them. And so this is not, the journal entry here is not looking at movement types to determine the account that is being debited and credited. It's going to look someplace else. And we've got to see that in a minute. Okay, so that's the movement types. And now, so let's go to the presets is where we can have different movement types grabbing presets, just like we can with journal entries. We won't go to that one. Let's go to MO analysis. This is very important to us. It's going to come into play. All right, so we don't have any preset. This movement type doesn't have any analysis codes being attached to it, but let's see. I'm not sure I can create them, but we can attach analysis codes. Okay. So in PK1, department is an analysis dimension, just like our fund is an analysis dimension, and function is an analysis dimension. And so we could say this movement type requires the department or requires the function or so forth. Okay? And so that's how we would set up the MO analysis is the way that we would have the movement type have required analysis dimensions, just like we have journal types require certain analysis dimensions. Okay? Now, value is sort of the where Eddie comes into play here. Okay, he asked a question about taxes. So value is what types of amounts do we want to keep track of in the movement? Okay, so the quantity would be one. Okay, the unit price would be another, and then the net price would, and this one that we're reverse engineering, you see, and it calculates this, this, and this. And so the movement type keeps track of these three values on an issue of inventory, okay? And so Eddie may want a sale for in a certain state that calculate the tax, and that's where we would calculate the tax, and it would be recorded as well. So if you want a value in the journal entry or in the movement type, you have to set it up, okay? And then the setup is actually simple. Excuse me. I say that. Yeah, all right. The setup is simple, but you got a wheel within wheel here. All right, so let me cancel this and show it to you. All right, so if you need a value that is kept track of in the movement type, and also the movement type will pass the value to the JV. If you need a value, you have to set it up. All right, to set up a value, you create a value. It's very simple. We'll insert one. All right, this part of it is simple. Okay, it's going to go over to your value labels. Okay, wheels within wheels. We're not creating the value here. It comes from value labels. Okay, so you go to value labels. So back to Siri's original question earlier, in a theoretical world, we would first go to value labels, okay, and create a value label that we needed, okay, all right, and this would be the value label that we needed: discount, quantity, state of taco, tax. So these are the value labels, okay? And it corresponds with these numbers. So if you need this for invoices or statements or receipts, you got to create it here in value labels first, all right? And we got the value label. Let's see. We create the one that we want. Let me pick up one here so you can see what it looks like. All right, and so it's got a short name. It's got the description, lookup code, quantity, just like we are used to seeing. So each time we create, we have an item and a movement that we want, like a calculation, we have to calculate the value label, okay? We also have to create a formula. All right, so this formula is all the formulas that we need are created over here, okay, like discount. Okay, so once we've created the value label, how do you calculate the discount, or how do you calculate the tax? So Eddie, you would have your taxes over here to calculate the formula for the tax for each of the value labels you've created. You know, Chiapas tax, taco tax, whatever it is. All right. So once we've got the formulas, then we're all set. So we.
Sorry, Mark.
Go ahead.
I think I missed the step that took you to that screen.
Okay. All right, so imagine that we were perfectly clear-headed, wildly intelligent, and we had great forethought. We know that before we get over to movements, that on our movements, we're going to have to keep track of our taxes for each of our different regions, okay? So we would come over here and create a value label, all right? We'd open value labels and we create value labels that we know we're going to need on a movement, okay? That's not practically the way we do it. Practically, we realize we need, we're in the middle of creating a movement, we realize we need a value label, and then we run over here and make it so we can use it. Okay, that's practically the way it happens. So we create a value label first, and then we go to Formula Designer on how the value label is calculated. Does that make sense? And we're creating a value label for every description that we are going to need on a receipt, on a every numerical value that we're going to need when we record a movement. Okay, if we want to have a total sales, or we want to have a tax, or whatever, we create the value label. We also are creating a corresponding formula designer, a formula for each of our value labels. So, are you with me? Okay. So we have a
Yes, sir.
yeah. So we have a value label, and this is just the form. You know, you could. We don't need to have that come. The value labels are here, not there. So here are the value labels that have already been set up in PK1. Discount percentage. You know, so if we need in our processing employee discount, well, this is where we create it. Okay. If we needed quantity, if we needed a tax rate to show on our forms, okay. Unit price, anything that we need to show up in our reports, our printing of a receipt or a sale or whatever, we're creating the value label, and we're also creating the formula. Okay, and so this is a value label, and basically this is all there is to it. A value label is very simple. Basically, it creates the word, and here you see prevent sign reversal. I believe this is where we are going wrong on our other one, but we'll see that in a minute. We have sign reversals going on. And then we also, after we've done a value label, we also have to do a formula designer, okay? And I'm not positive, but we have value labels showing here, the same value labels we just saw. So my assumption is that when we create a value label, they now show up over here, and we can pick and create the formula for the one that we want, okay? And this is similar to our form designer, if I remember correctly. Okay, I'm not an expert at anything in this software, and I'm not for sure not here, but we would have to learn how to make this thing work. And I believe we open it. It's similar to form designer, okay, where you check it out, you open it, okay, and I forget which one I'm working on here. So this is discount percentage, okay, and I open the discount percentage, okay, and then I go okay, and then I see the formula that, and down here I'm editing down at the bottom. Okay, I've spent a few minutes with this before, but it really came pretty natural when I really needed it. I worked down here at the bottom and saw the top, or maybe I was working at the top and got it at the bottom. That's it. Okay, and so you put the mathematics and you fiddle around with this thing a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm not a real pro at it, but I can get the math, plus, minus, I right-clicked right there, plus, minus, star, divide, and add, and build my formula, okay? And this down here is the results of the formula I build up here. Does that make sense a little bit? You think you could figure that out? Okay. Good. You're a very smart. Okay. Okay. So you create the value label and the formula that you want for the movement. Okay. This value setup. So here's quantity. Now this pulled from the value label warehouse, it pulled the ones that I want to use in this movement. Okay, so this movement, we're reverse engineering the issue movement. We're pulling quantity. Oh, we pulled the quantity. So, like for example, if I have this one here, I could go in here and insert another one, and all of my value labels are showing up there. Okay, I could grab the one I needed for this purpose. Okay, so I've got to get it into my movement because this is adding that value to be remembered in the movement. Okay, so a movement, I can add the data that I want the movement to capture with these value labels. Okay, and you can see here that let me just grab one here. A tax. See, I don't believe these things are hooked together as much as you would think. Okay. I'm fiddling around here. So it looks like to me, I'm trying to change formula code. It looks to me like there's a formula codes that could be grabbed here and not automatically running from that. So if I want to create one that grabs the formula from the formula codes on the other page, it can do it. And then there's the calculation sequence where you've got to control if you got like a total first and then you want to calculate the tax, then you'd make sure that you want to put the calculation sequence so everything was being done in the correct order. Right? I know that was sort of ambiguous, but do you follow it a little bit? All right. Thanks for the encouragement. Okay. So that's the value labels. Mostly with those so far, I have used them and just sort of grabbed what were already there. Okay, so at some point somebody has to become an expert on creating them. Okay, to me, they look like they would be a problem that needs to be tackled, but they also do not look like a problem that would be that insurmountable. And I will get you to the insurmountable problems soon. Okay, now so far this has been very simple. We have gone through sort of general things, okay? So it looks as if everything in this one that worked is set to not in use, not in use. Accounts, there's no accounts giving. Inventory allocation, order confirmation was selected there. That's sort of straightforward. The rest of them seem sort of simple. Nothing has been selected here. And so this movement type that we have created so far was very simple, the simplest you could possibly imagine. And that's because I hadn't pushed that button stage yet, okay? So do we need a break? What do you think?
We can continue, Mac.
Okay. All right. I need to get a little feedback from you guys. Are you paying attention or are you doing something else?
We are paying attention.
All right.
We are good students.
I do not mind doing something else. I would prefer if you were to do something else that you would go do something else, but I don't even mind, you know. All right, so we'll continue, okay? All right. Now the stages.
Sorry, Dr. Mark.
Uh-huh.
Did we fix the part where the debit was going to inventory and not cost of goods sold?
Yeah, it's going backwards, right? We haven't fixed that. We haven't even encountered where is it getting the debit and credit from. Where is it getting the accounts? We have seen where it's not. We saw where it could be getting it. It could be getting the accounts and debit and credits from the movement type, but nothing's there, right? So we are in a world of mystery right now, okay? And so let me go back to sharing, and we will. There we go. All right, so you're seeing it okay again?
Yes.
Now we're in stage, all right? And stage is like the big deal here, okay? Now this is about the simplest stage demonstration that you could possibly have, all right? But it is doing stages. I want to make sure we're all clear on the word stage. A different English word might have been better. Steps might have been better. A stage is where you go and you take a certain thing and you go to do a certain step, and then you go and you get all done, and you go do a next step, and then you go the next step. I think this, if you talked about steps in when you talked about steps, but in a sequential sort of do one stage and the next stage, and what happens at each step along the way. That's what stages are, and there are 2 stages in our process. This is the process, the movement that we created. We can add as many stages as we want. This is very simple, okay? The first stage is the order entry. So when you press OK, and you've done the order entry, then what is going on? And this is where you got to really wake up, because the complication is over here. So when you press the OK button there at order entry, okay, this document right there is fired off, okay? So this is going to be, I guess, your sales document, your issue document or something. This is where the sales document is going to be. Does that make sense? David, you're capturing that, because that would be sort of what you produced, you know, so this document, before we got over here, ideally would have already been prepared. What is the document? So just like in a journal entry, we want the journal entry to go get issued, okay, a JV to be printed, or what document is going to come out whenever you press OK, all right? And then what ledger interface, okay, all right, so at order entry, nothing is done in the ledger. You see these are both empty, okay? Direct print, no. Order date, I believe we're okay. Posting date, we're controlling everything about what happens when you click OK. Along this row here is what happens when you click OK. And then you have order confirm. Now, order confirm is a stage. You remember me doing a stage a few minutes ago. An order confirm. Okay, let's see if we could do inventory issues. You remember I pressed the confirm? Well, when I press that button, I am confirming it, okay? And so what it means is when the operator presses confirm, what do you want it to do? All right? I think what might be interesting here is let's look at what other stages are pre-set up. Okay? Here are the ones that are already in here. Okay, you can't see them very well, but I have order entry, order confirm, picking, picking confirm, dispatch, dispatching confirm, receipt entry, and not applicable. Those are the stages that are available in a movement. Okay, and so we want to make sure that we're a little bit clear on this. Order entry is that somebody, like the salesman, puts in the entry. Order confirm is when their supervisor presses that confirm button. So you can have some people who are about to set up an order and someone else can confirm it. And then picking is that someone can go out into the warehouse and pick the items off the shelf, and then someone could check them. So the picking would say that the person who picked it the stage could be picking, or you could have someone check it and be picking confirmed. And so I think and then it goes over to the shipping department, dispatch, and dispatch confirmed. Okay, now we can control when the inventory is reduced at any of these steps, and we can confirm when the journal entry is made at any of these steps. Okay, so just to illustrate it, order confirm in our the one that we're reverse engineering, the issued movement type, the order confirm fires off the journal entry. Okay, fires off the journal entry. Let me get out of here. So, all right, good. I'm gonna go out and come back in so I don't accidentally change something. Okay, so order confirm in our construction, in this construction of this movement type, that's when the journal entry is being made. Okay, and we can adjust a delay. Okay. So it goes to a different period. I can't quite understand why anyone would want to do that. And so the big thing here is that on these stages is that the document format has to be designed and the ledger interface has to be designed before you set this up. Okay? But in theory, that's the theoretical notion. In practicality, you would come over here, pick the stage, here, order entry. Oh, I need a document to come out at order entry, and you go and create the document and put it in. And then at order confirm, I want it to make the journal entry. Okay? All right, so that's sort of the things here. So the stages are not particularly complicated, but we have those 6 or 7 stages. So in a really elaborate process here, we could have all 7 of them up here, controlling what documents are coming out when they are done, what journal entries are being made. Okay, so if you have a picking, you might want a pick list produced, okay, so that they know what to go get off the shelf, and maybe at the picking confirm, that's when you want your journal entry done. Okay, and so that's that. All right, so now, again, we have the wheels within the wheels thing. The document format code, we would go over to our editor and edit this document and get it right, okay? I believe this is document format code is something that David and Gerardo understand well. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah, that you know that oh, if I want a document, you know what a document format code, and we already set up document formats elsewhere in Sun Systems. Right? So this is just one more time where you have a document prepared and fired off by the system report. Okay? The one that we don't know about is this ledger interface. All right? The ledger interface is going to be used here, and you can see down here an interesting thing, ledger interface reversal, all right, which we need to learn about. All right, so do we want to use the ledger interface but do it backwards? So maybe there's something there that helps us with the debit credit. Yeah, so there's no reversal being created, so let's not fiddle with that. So right now, let's go, what we have, again, is the wheels within wheels thing. When that confirm button is pushed, this ledger interface is going to fire off. We don't know, you don't know what ledger interface is right now, so we're going to go learn it, what it is. But this is what's controlling the debits and the credits, okay? And so this is MTRF issue is the ledger interface. If I had a halfway decent mind, I wouldn't need to write that down, but I have burned out my mind with riotous living, and so we go MTRF issue. So this is the controlling the debits and credits. So you can imagine that we have a ledger interface that we might want to use on several movement types. And so instead of having to create the debits and credits on every one, we create one ledger interface that controls the debits and credits, and that all of the movement types use it. So we leave this now, and so actually we are done talking about movement types, but it's a lot harder than I made it sound because we have this ledger interface that we have to master. Okay. All right, let's see. There we go. Let me go over here to inventory. I think it's under order fulfillment, and we look around for ledger interface. Right here we go. Okay. Wow. So we now have gone into this little world here of ledger interface, and this has to do with mapping from the movement type to the JV, all right? And the ledger interface becomes its own thing to create, all right? And it's available, ledger interfaces are created, and then they're available to be used by movement types. All right, so we've got all of these ledger interfaces, and they are controlling the way entries are made. All right, and so we want an MTRF issue. Okay, so we go OK, and then this is controlling how the debits and credits work. All right. So this ledger interface is called MTRF issue. If we created it, we could go through to create a new one by inserting it, and we'd fill it in. This has to do with the inventory module, okay, and this is the long description, and we created it, online posting, target ledger A, journal, INVAD, okay. Inventory add. Okay, so this is the journal type that this interface is going to fire off, and my guess is that we have to create this journal type over in the accounting side, the financial side, and it's going to be used by this interface. Okay, all right, and you're going to see here something that looks very similar to transfer to ledger import. Okay, post if no errors, right to hold, provisional posting, generate, and so we're out of our wisdom. as we create this because it's the same as a ledger import. I think they somehow or another work through each other. But I got off on the wrong track, and it took me about a week to get off of it, is these are not producing imports that I've got to go over and import. The entry happens. But it's sort of like an import, okay? Never mind. All right, so all of this is sort of setting up that first page of an import. So this is not so hard. This is the interface name and description and what accounts is going to, what journals is adding to, you know, do you want it to use? And then we get over to line details, okay? All right, and we get over to line details, and now we're getting to something that looks like a debits and credits. All right, now we're getting into a craziness here that is almost beyond my ability to explain it. But it is the heart of the matter. We've finally gotten down to wheels within wheels. The ledger interface is MTRF issue, is inventory costs are it, and line 1 of the entry is account recognition code IM inventory. We'll talk about that in a minute. And 26,000 is the debit, okay? And at this point, I think we come up against our mistake, okay? All right, 26,000 is the cost of goods sold account, all right? And I believe that is right, okay? So it needs to be debited. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So it needs to be debited and inventory needs to be credited, but it did it backwards.
Mac,
Uh-huh.
Mac, the journal type, the name of the journal type is inventory adjustments.
Ah, so maybe it was reversing it because they had the journal type back here. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Inventory adjustment. So maybe that was doing it. Maybe there's something else flipping this thing. Okay? All right, so the setup over here, was correct. So something is reversing it. Now, when I had my little class in it, okay, so we're talking about all that I've been showing you guys. I had one solid day class in it, and hours and days working. There was something about reversals that I did not completely understand. And so we would have to make sure we understood that. You know, why is this thing reversing? Because it's set up correct here. If we come over and it said debit and then below it said credit, oh, we'd say, oh, this is wrong, and we'd fix it. All right, so something is causing it to reverse, and it may be like Gustavo said, is that this thing is posting to a journal that's designed to reverse or something. We'd have to see if we can figure it out. All right, but so this is controlling. Now, the account recognition code is beyond our level of complication we need. I can explain it easily. Why they do this, I have no idea. Okay, I have no idea why they did, but account recognition code is right over here. Ledger interface account recognition code is real simple. It just sounds like it's silliness if you ask me. So we have an account recognition code over here like IM inventory, okay, and it's almost like I don't know what you'd call it, renaming of your account codes. It's sort of like what it is, okay? So this is the account recognition code, and somehow or another this account recognition code is attached to the accounts. So instead of putting the account in, you put in the account recognition code. There's something about that doesn't seem like it makes any point at all to me. Okay? All right. So to me, we don't put any effort into learning what account recognition codes are. Okay. Well, I forgot the one we're using already, and I've lost it. Issue, I think, is what it is. Okay, but the point is that we go all of this complication to get down to where it matters and the line details. Okay. All right, and this is where it matters with the debits and the credits. All right. At this point, we can have analysis codes going in and being suppressed or replaced, okay? Making the analysis codes pass from wherever we get them from to the movement through to the ledger entry is the big challenge, because we want something like the journal, the movement type, or we want something like the inventory item to determine what fund, function, and restriction that we are going to use, and how to pass them from all three of those steps. Let's say from the inventory item to the movement type, and from the movement type to the JV, is where the latest place I've been struggling, how to get it to pass. Okay? I don't see that this is helping us too much here. All right, now, so there you go. I think that's all the wheels within wheels. Now we have under line details again. I keep going away from it and going back. Sorry. All right, I clicked Inventory Cost tab here, and you can see the cost type coming through here with right here. Do you see that right there? All right, this is the cost type is being captured at the inventory level and passed all the way through to cost of goods sold. So one complication passed all the way through cost of goods sold are the cost types. Cost types would be how we keep track of it, how much we spent on translation, how much we spent on actual printing, how much we spent on copyrights, and so forth. If we could figure out how to do it, because our managers want to know more than just the cost of goods sold. They want to know in our sales, how does that break down into those different cost types? And I believe that's the way that we'll keep that straight. All right. And so I think one of the first things that we should take on, we have sort of two challenges. We want to learn how to build one of these ourselves, and we want to learn how to, we want to learn how to build one ourselves. And I think somebody needs to figure out, why is that entry reversing? What is it in all of this maze of stuff that is causing that entry to reverse? Now, in this journal here, you see, we could also have the sales entry being recorded. Okay, so this is the journal entry that is being made right now, debiting cost sold and crediting inventory. Okay, but we could also have it debit something, cash, and credit sales, okay? Or debit receivable and credit sales, and how to have the user have to enter when they do a movement. When they have to do a movement that we've seen working, they are entering the inventory item, they're entering the number of items that went and what shelf, but can they also enter the customer code? Can the account code that then gets passed over here to be debited for the receivable, okay? And so that would be a challenge for us to worry about. All right, and then the final thing I want to show you, okay, is, let's see here, is in our ledger interface, we have analysis mapping to ledger, okay? Now, before we go too far, let's go over here, and before I get us all confused, let's go over to common analysis hierarchy. All right, so now this is stuff that we all understand, right? Analysis hierarchy. I believe we all understand it. So we have analysis dimension, and we have where does this analysis dimension is? Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. Oh, I'm in PK1. No wonder I'm a little confused here. All right, analysis hierarchy. All right, let me try this. I can do it. All right, so the analysis dimension are things like in SunPlus. Analysis dimensions are like fund, function, restriction, and then we have other ones that don't come to mind right away. Location, I believe we use, isn't that right? What's another analysis dimension we have in SunPlus? Who? Well, let me have one that's not transaction. Maybe I'm stumbling around here a little bit, but I don't mind. Let me just do change business unit. Change business unit to ADA, right? So I'm back in the world that we know and understand, all right? And then the hierarchy, all the analysis dimensions that are out there are here in SunPlus, okay? So here are all the ones that we use. Now we have 10 of them that we have assigned to transactions. So I can't name them all, but I can look them all up. We have fund, function, details, flag, org ID, project, resource, restriction, all assigned to those transactions, right? TFWW, who, are assigned to transactions. Where is class assigned? I'm assuming by your lack of answer that none of you know.
The class is in the city quoi or not?
Yeah.
I woke you all up all of a sudden, huh? Assigned to accounts. Chart of accounts.
Yes.
Yeah. And category. Where is that assigned? Where do we use that? All right, so let's see here. Let me close out something here. All right, so I want to go. Yeah, I want to go to where I assigned the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that? Analysis hierarchy. Nah, I keep going to the wrong place. Maybe I'm looking for the wrong thing. Ah, there it is. Analysis structure. It's not hierarchy.
Yes.
Structure. All right. So we have in our analysis structure, we have, for example, the ledger, which we all know and love. Okay, so I'm going to go to ledger here.
910901.
Yeah. So I go to ledger, and there's the ones that we all know and love. Resource, TFWW, fund, function, restriction, org ID, and so forth. Okay, in the same place, okay, in structure, I can have items, okay, assigned to a warehouse. I could assign analysis dimensions to a warehouse. I could assign analysis dimensions to a inventory issue or inventory receipt, and then a movement. Okay, so just like ledger can have 10 assigned analysis dimensions, that's what we know of, fund, function, restriction, analysis, resource. We can also have 10 assigned to movements. Okay, and the way I understand it is that if you want to pass it from a movement to a JV, you have to first assign it to a movement and then map it to the JV. All right. So right now under an ADA, let's see, we have movements, but we have nothing assigned to it. Okay, we have nothing assigned to a movement over an ADA business unit. All right, so we can go back over here to change business units to the PK1. Okay, and we have analysis structure here in PK1, and just to get a sense of it, let's go to ledger first, 901. And they have an analysis structure in PK1 that corresponds to our fund, function, restriction, who, ID, org ID, project. They have product, department, project, and employment, and tax. So an account can be required to have a department, just like we require to have we require a function and a revenue and expense account. We require a resource and a revenue and expense account. They have a department. All right, so what we want to master is we want to be able to go over to that cost of goods sold account and make it mandatory in our chart of accounts, okay? Chart of accounts, this is the skill that I am stumped on, okay? In chart of accounts, we want to be able to go to that 26,000, okay? That account, and the analysis details, we want to make the department mandatory, okay? Or the product mandatory, or something mandatory over there, and then we want to make a movement that will make a journal entry and populate that dimension, okay? And so the deal is that we have in our analysis structure, okay, we have ledger 901, and we have it required in our accounting system, all right? And we want to be able to pass those analysis codes from a movement to the ledger, all right? And we don't have that demonstrated here in PK1 for us. And so we have a movement line here, okay? And you could see project, department, and employee are captured in the movement, all right? And those are, and the way I understand it is that those have to be captured in a movement before you can pass them, map them over to the JV, the ledger. So we first capture them in a movement line, and then we can pass them to the ledger. All right, that is being done by this little functionality here. Okay, over in order fulfillment, analysis mapping to the ledger. Okay, so this is where I am currently stumped. So we do a matching, okay, and right now we're talking about an issue. Okay, so we're issuing. We go okay, and the way that I understand this is that this is the ledger over here. Okay, product, department, and project, employee, and tax. So this is the ledger analysis structure here. This corresponds, if we open this in Sun Plus, we get, you know, fund, function, restriction, details, project. And that right here is the analysis dimension that we want to map to there from there, okay? So this is, my best memory is that this is the analysis dimension over here from the movement type, and it maps over to there. We want the movement type to be feeding our ledger transaction analysis codes, okay? And that's happening in our mapping. Does that make sense? And so we need someone to tackle being able to make a movement pass to a ledger entry, an analysis code. And right now, we don't have that happening. And the reason we don't have it happening is that over in PK1 is optional. The analysis structure in PK1 okay, the analysis structure in PK1, I'm showing you the wrong place here. Let's go here. Okay, on the chart of accounts, I'm in PK1 now. Their account code for inventory, 26,000, has these as optional. So if we had marked one of these like department as mandatory, that journal entry wouldn't have come up. because we weren't feeding it something that was required. So the reason their movement type made a journal entry is because they had it really simplified. Okay, they don't have department mandatory, so the movement type didn't have to come up with it, nothing had to be mapped, but we have those three as mandatory, so somehow or another we have to populate, those four as mandatory, fund, function, restriction, and resource. We have to figure out a way to feed the answer for those analysis codes from the movement and so forth. Now, the movement can be feeding the answer. The ledger interface can be feeding the answer. So the first part of this is that the movement has to capture in its analysis codes what it wants to pass. Okay? So when we do a movement, it needs to capture what it needs. And so it can, so first, this is like working backwards. We need it, the very end step is that we need the analysis dimensions over in our fund, function, and restriction, and maybe many other things. And then we need to get that from the movement type. Well, where does the movement type get it from? The movement type can get it from itself. It can be programmed into the movement type, which controls the analysis dimensions, or it can be fed from the inventory item itself. Okay? So over in the item, the item master, okay, okay, now this can start making sense to you, what we talked about the other day. Here is the item itself. Okay, this is a GPS mobile phone attachment. I will amend it so it gets a little darker. Okay, this is the item itself. Well, over here in item analysis, we can have the item have analysis codes that are then passed to the movement, that are then passed by to the ledger. And the way I understand it, that is the hierarchy. Okay? If it's in the analysis code, if it's in analysis for an item, then that will control the movement analysis code, and you don't need it over in the movement. Okay? If you don't have it in the inventory item, then it needs it in the movement. But it's got to somewhere in there, it's got to come in so it can be there and for the ledger, being mapped to the ledger. I know that's a little bit confusing, but I hope that makes sense. And the same thing's true with the accounts. What controls the accounts? If you want the accounts to be controlled by the item, which is, I believe, what we want, then we set the accounts up over here, and the movement controls the accounts. Now, it doesn't control the accounts, the item controls the accounts. In fact, let me reverse what I just said. I said it completely opposite. Every time we set up an item, we don't want to have to set up the accounts. Okay? We would like it to be controlled by the ledger interface. And we have a different ledger interface for items that need to go to a different account. Otherwise, we get all confused. You know, it's the simplest to think of an item controlling what accounts is debiting and crediting. But if we have a lot of items, that might be a lot of extra work. I don't know. Would that be the type of thing that we have to decide? Okay, so what do you think? Any questions before we knock off?